say because
I hate Edge.
nervous and awkward.
You start getting
No power options available.
use those things.
Yeah,
This has been such
kind
a
of had that
squishy
happen with me. I don't
It
know
is.
how I fell
It
asleep,
is,
but I fell asleep.
And I
And
guess
these three fingers were like pressed like this
what's
for
bothering me a little bit is
4 or 5 hours before I woke up, and then I couldn't bend them. I
I
actually
don't
had to reach
quite
up and,
have
physically bend them because there was no,
connection.
they were sore all day.
I find that it sometimes I'll get my hand between the pillow and my head, it lays back.
How do we reboot this thing?
Just can't move.
Yeah, well,
They
The
clicked
doctor
for,
told me the other day that call
Maybe
me
it
to
doesn't.
find out
But
if
maybe
I
it
have
does.
No
arthritis.
power option.
What does he need?
Osteo.
He wants me to reboot the machine.
Oh,
maybe
you
that's
don't
not,
get
maybe
it.
that's not our,
Remote connection and whatnot. If it takes you a half hour to get flexibility in your fingers, it's osteo. If it takes you an hour, it's rheumatoid.
see
joy.
this spot.
Oh, we're
So it took me about 10 minutes to get them to go, and then they would click every time I flexed them.
And I just hate it when you have to take
our
care
own,
of their
well,
health.
If it's set up on
in
this
our,
machine.
I think.
Yeah, that's what I, what it is I think
Yeah,
I've got a low window,
but I
so
don't,
All right, we are going to turn on the mic and open the Planning Commission meeting for October 8th. And I want to thank everybody in the audience who is here tonight. We appreciate it. We do like having people in the audience because it gets really, we like ourselves, but we like to talk to other people as well.
When did that start?
When did that start?
I'm kidding.
It's always we like to talk to the public. They're our biggest fans. So we have an agenda tonight that is going to be fairly jam-packed. But before we get to that, we have public comments, time for items that are not currently on the Planning Commission agenda. And we would welcome anyone who would like to come up and talk to us about something. And I only have one slip, but if you decide you do want to talk after Paul gets done, please feel free to come up and you can fill out a slip later.
Thank you, Paul Edgar, Oregon City. Just a little update. I've been trying to find out what was going to happen with that fences out in the streets and blocking stuff. All of a sudden, we find out that there's a city code, 12.04.120, and it's standard, our code, and it's about permanent obstructions, and it says...
Well, just hang on a quick second. So it's in chapter 12, which is...
12.04.020.
Right, I know that, but what is chapter 12? Because
This is on obstruction permits, requirement for...
Carrie's going to look it up what the title is of chapter 12, because I only have 17 memorized in my brain.
Streets, sidewalks, and public places.
Street, sidewalk, and public places, okay.
And
1204 is streets.
streets, and it says permanent obstructions, it is unlawful for any person to place or put or maintain an obstruction other than a temporary obstruction as defined under subsection B of this section. Any public street or alleyway or city without obtaining approval of a right-of-way permit from the commission by passage of a resolution. And it also states in here a temporary obstruction is something that's in and out in 60 days. So within this requirement, there's always been this need for over 2 years of talking about it, that the city, to allow this to take place over and above site obstruction, and that is also addressed into this document, is this need for a justification to comply with this code. And that apparently is the reason why we can't get a letter back from John Lewis on it, is because he finally found this or knew this, but it's been in case for lots of years. And so all I can say is that I hope that we start complying with our city codes, and that goes to everybody, including myself. Thank you.
Can I ask you a quick question? Because we've been following I'm assuming everybody's been following your correspondence, but my question is, again, what are you saying is that chapter is being used as justification as to why it's there? Because from what you read, it sounds like it's not supposed to be there.
It's not supposed to be, it's period not supposed to be there.
Okay.
And this says absolutely it's not supposed to be there. And so, again, I question why is it still there? And the fact, and they also say in this stuff, one of the critical things is when public safety, and said, when you are making a judgment call, let's say subjectively, if public safety is in jeopardy in any way, it takes precedence. And in this case, public safety and this is a restricted right-of-way that is now part of the Kenema to McLaughlin Trail. It's going to have a lot more people on it. It has a lot of people on it, cars on it. And in fact, I had an accident on it one time just on slippery conditions coming down from my house. So it's just one of those areas on a 22% grade. So it's dangerous and restricted. And I'm hoping that somewhere along the line, we find out a way to get it resolved. Thank you.
Chair McGriff,
Yes, sir.
have I forgotten something, or what is this in reference to? Is there something going on that?
Yes, this has come to us several times over several meetings, so I don't know if you were here when it first was brought up. There is apparently a situation with an obstruction within the public right-of-way in Kenema.
Basically, somebody built a fence in the right of way.
Okay, this isn't the one across the stream or the creek,
No.
this is something
That's a
different.
different one.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
So then that causes me to muse how many actual right-of-way encroachments there are in our fair city.
Probably a lot of them. Well,
Okay.
sounds like we need to talk to our friend John Lewis. I think we said that last time. John, if you're listening, come on down.
Encroachment permit, I think is what they get for that.
Well, but it's saying you can't have an encroachment.
You can,
But
but
it
it
has
takes
to go
us,
through the city
to go
commission,
through the
and it has to go through a
review process.
resolution, has to go through all of that, and obviously this hasn't happened.
Yeah.
Oh,
just come on up, no, come on, you just
yeah,
need
you
to
can come up, but don't talk from the audience, because we don't wanna get in trouble. No. Remember, you can't talk until you get up here, because it has to all be on the record. We can't do that. I know
I
you know
hadn't
that.
planned on speaking.
I know you had. Come on
Just
up.
kind of jumped up in here.
That's
You just
okay.
need to say your name real quick.
I'm Patty Webb.
Okay.
I live in Kenema, and I live on the other side
a little
of that
closer.
fence, which in between my property and that fence is a matter of dispute where the right-of-way is, but that fence is also on the right-of-way on my side. It encroaches on all four sides. And it goes into the right-of-way, which I'm not supposed to set foot in. I receive threats of fines and fees if I even, what I've been told, rake a leaf there. I'm
But it's public
trespassing.
right away, right?
Yes, but his fence is on it and yells at me and has a camera on it right now, trained at my front door. So I can't go out in my front yard. I can't go to my garbage cans. I can't set foot out my front or back door, anywhere on my property really, without being filmed by this guy. I can be on the very opposite end of my house for about 8 feet, and that's about it, that I can't be filmed and seen. So I'm pretty tired of it.
Well, we don't
It's
have
going
any
on for a
jurisdiction over
long
filming.
time. Huh?
We don't have any jurisdiction over that. That sounds like that.
But it's on the fence post that's out in the right-of-way.
Right.
So
So
he's
if the
also
fence
using it for
goes
that.
away, then the film, or
Right.
at least that angle goes away.
Help us, Pete.
And that's what's covering Coffee Creek. It's 6 feet
Yeah, there's
tall
a-
over Coffee Creek.
Letter from John Lewis that,
I think we have some correspondence from John Lewis regarding this fence that we can forward on to the planning commission, just for to share it.
Great.
Yeah.
What I saw, it sounded like he said that it was okay. And unfortunately, I don't get that it's okay. But that's just me. Yes, sir.
What's this got to do with the planning commission?
This is somebody just coming up and telling us about a concern they
And
have
why,
that deals
and
with
why
the
don't we
code.
referring this to code
We-
enforcement?
Well,
Citizen
that was
comment.
what we suggested.
Because if we don't do that, we're leading people on to think that we have jurisdiction
Well,
over
we
this.
don't have jurisdiction, but we're good listeners.
Oh,
It has been referred to
I'd
code
like to get a
enforcement
good
several
Okay.
times.
referral.
All right, well, I
Get them
guess,
to the right people
Yeah.
to solve the problem.
yeah, well,
Yeah,
like I
I'd like
said,
that.
I'll
That'd be
speak
great.
to Mr. Lewis offline.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is
Thanks,
there
Patty.
anybody else that has anything that's not on the agenda, which is only one thing on the agenda? If you have something you'd like to talk to us about that we can do something about, maybe, or not?
I'm not sure if this is on the agenda or not, so I have to
If
ask
it has to
you.
do with the equitable housing or legislative stuff, yes, that's on the agenda.
It's regarding short-term vacation rentals.
Yes, that's on the agenda.
Okay, so then I would wait till the end.
Please.
Sure. Thank you.
yep, that's great.
Okay, looks like we have no other comments. So we will get to the public hearing. So as many of you know, we have on the agenda tonight a public hearing, a continued public hearing, because we've been talking about this for quite a while. And it is involving legislative amendments to the code, involving equitable housing and many, 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 many other things. We have a commission report, there's some amendments and other things that were on the website that hopefully people had a chance to look at. There was a lot of stuff there. And we certainly apologize if you weren't able to get through all of it, because I'm sure some of us weren't able to get through all of it either. But be that as it may, we are going to move ahead and do you have a brief staff report for us? And then I'll go over how we're going to do the public hearing.
Right. So tonight, my goal is to just go back over the direction that we received from the Planning Commission at the last meeting and some of the amendments that we've changed in the most recent version of code. In your packet, as you mentioned, you have a commission report. We have both a clean copy and a red line copy of the proposals with a summary of major code amendments. And that's a tabular format. Our legislative findings and staff report, a compilation of all public comments to date, along with the application and all supporting materials, as well as some of the supplemental plans that are referenced in the staff report. And we also wanted to discuss tonight the draft policy advisement to the City Commission and whether you have any changes to that. The new public comments that we received, which are uploaded on your agenda and are attached, are 3 exhibits from Paul Edgar, and I believe Paul's going to speak to those tonight. And a letter from the Home Builders Association of Metropolitan Portland from James Atkins with respect to lot averaging. And that's on the dais before you as well. So as we mentioned, these amendments are a combination of the code amendments that came from the Equitable Housing Project. We've been working with the community to provide updates to our development standards in the code, and that includes a variety of topics, such as options for additional housing opportunities, as well as other changes which were not part of the Equitable Housing Code, but which were identified by staff. And as a whole, the amendments result in greater opportunities for housing. They reduce and refine many of our regulations, streamline our processes, provide clarity around existing standards, and their formatting so that they're easy to follow. It does not include any changes to our current zoning map or authorize any city-initiated construction or development. Summarizing the public outreach that we've done to date, we've had more than 44 meetings or opportunities to engage with this project, including 21 meetings dedicated to the housing issues, 3 surveys, 5 stakeholder interviews, and 5 project advisory and technical advisory team meetings, 7 Planning Commission work sessions. Now we're on hearing number 5, and we have 2 City Commission work sessions so far.
So we really didn't have any real hearings, we just continued it. So I don't want people to think we had 5 hearings because we really didn't.
One long one.
Yes, thank you, it's one long one.
Sure there wasn't 20 work sessions that felt like it.
Well, we
I
had
think we
some,
left a 0.
I think we had some that you weren't maybe on this planet for, because I think I remember being here for all of them.
So our most recent packet, which there is a copy in the back if folks want to refer to it, that's based on the direction received from Planning Commission on the 24th of September. And we've also responded to all the testimony received to date, and there's a summary in the public comments attachment, which responds to public comments. Our legislative findings include how we did our citizen outreach and involvement. They respond to the City Commission's directions with respect to this equitable housing project. They address all of the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan that we feel are relevant to these amendments. And they explain how the objectives of the equitable housing project and the recommendations of that project advisory team and technical advisory team were met. Thank you. I'm just going to go briefly over the things that changed since the last meeting based on your direction. So there's 4 slides I'm going to go through. As discussed, with respect to accessory dwelling units, we are retaining owner occupancy and retaining the parking standards. 3 to 4 plexes will be prohibited in the historic commercial district and will be required to provide parking. Internal conversions, we've set a maximum addition to a home for an internal conversion back at 500 square feet and up to 800 square feet for a detached dwelling, and requiring parking. Mobile food carts would be permitted in the general industrial, campus industrial, and mixed-use employment districts. And we moved a 24-month restriction with respect to those districts that was problematic. Tree removal in annexation areas, we have a slide that deals with a letter that talks about that in more detail, so I'm going to go about that, discuss that. Next slide. There are some headings in the site plan and design review standards that are we're using to shorten some of the standards and renumbering that. As far as traffic site obstructions, we're making references to our traffic site code when planting trees. We removed the exemption for truck stops from transit street standards, even though we don't have truck stops. Didn't feel that there was a need for that section. Large retail is going to remain a 10,000 square foot store or larger, so that the large retail site plan and design review standards would apply to that size of store. And definitions, you asked us to clarify that manufactured homes have to be designed for permanent residential use. Next slide. We relocated in accessory structures code the metal-sided cargo containers section for clarity.
It's not on this. Sorry, my computer just shut itself down.
Oh, no. Okay. And we have clarified that our submittal requirements for plans require a paper copy of full-size plans, and that all building elevations be labeled with the street they face. For shelters, we added language to our conditional use section to require that a public meeting be held before a shelter opens. There would be 24-hour contact information and availability for the facility, and a good faith effort for a neighborhood agreement made. The shelters would be a conditional use in the mixed use downtown. However, they would be prohibited in the downtown design district. Next slide. And as far as the policy advisement for the City Commission, which is attached, we're going to go into that in the next slide. Your recommendation for housing needs analysis, that is being undertaken by Clackamas County, and we're going to be part of that effort. The lot averaging code, as we discussed, is going to allow only 10% lot averaging, restricted to 25% of the single-family detached lots in a subdivision, not including power line easements. In the mixed-use downtown, we are retaining the 45-foot height restriction, abutting single-family, and between Main and 99E and 11th and 15th Street, as well as the existing provision within 250 feet at the end of the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center. There was no change there.
Just
Yeah.
briefly for the audience, the thing
Sure.
that did change is that it's now, the restriction is abutting single family, which means it's only those properties directly adjacent. Used to be 100-foot
That's right.
distance.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
that cut like 80% of the properties out because of the tax lots touching.
So did you say we had the housing needs analysis in the policy advice?
No, that's going to happen.
No, that's not part of the current letter, but you could make it part of that, but it's already in the works, so.
But, yeah, I made a note that I wanted a sentence about that in
Okay.
there, just because we want to further emphasize how desperately it is needed.
Yeah, all right.
And if it isn't in
Yeah.
there, why is
So
it here?
that's
under
a draft.
policy advisement?
Yeah, and then
Why is it a bullet point?
it should include an economic needs
It's not under
analysis too.
policy advisory,
Okay.
it's a whole
Hopefully.
separate bullet.
Yeah, so,
All these are,
do you
So we
want
can
to?
talk about that when we get to
Yeah,
that.
we can get to that. With respect to master plan PUD, we're going to retain that requirement for institutional uses for 10 acres or more and make it optional for residential projects. So as far as the policy advisement letter, it addresses the following items so far. Supporting the affordable housing units for various financial means, exploring rezoning of the existing manufactured home parks to their own zone, updating the comprehensive plan, increasing the fees for tree mitigation, developing a policy or regulation to prohibit tree removal prior to annexation, which we discussed in detail at the last meeting, and updating our urban growth management agreement with Clackamas County. Are there any aspects of that letter that you would like to discuss right now, or we can go into that in more detail?
Well, I was going to ask, I thought we might go ahead and hear what the public testimony is, and then talk about the memo, or would you like to talk about the document itself first, if there's any other little things?
Let's have the testimony.
Well, no, I'm trying to get a framework here, so what I'm suggesting is that we hear the public testimony, and that then we talk about the memo and/or the document, or the document first and then the memo, but I think the memo will help clarify some of the stuff in here. There were some just minor things that I saw in the 437 page plus thingy that we got here.
oh, I thought it was 800.
So if you have any other, that's what just came to the top of my mind. If you have any other suggestions, we could.
Did your concerns have anything to do with commas and
No,
semicolons
they
and
do
things
not.
of that nature?
No, sir.
Well, I support your.
Leave that to others who are more
double spacing
proficient
and all that kind of
in
stuff.
their grammar.
Okay.
I did well in English, but I was a history major in
I was asked to
poli-sci.
leave.
So I bow to those people with a clearer vision of where the commas and the semicolons and all of that go.
I defer to your judgment.
Vern,
Final slide.
suggestion on how to proceed?
I thought we were partway finished with the staff report.
Almost, I'm just trying to get some for them, so he wanted to know if we wanted to talk about the policy memo next, and I said I wanted to ask you all whether or not we should go ahead and hear the public testimony first, then take whatever that is under advisement, then go ahead and talk about the memo and then the document. So I was asking you all a question, is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
For the public.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So I guess we're not gonna talk about the policy memo just yet, but we'll get there.
We've got it up on our screen, so you can talk to it too. So staff is recommending approval of this file with your policy advisement and your recommendations, and we anticipate that you're welcome to make any changes to that to move this proposal forward. Thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions?
Pete? I figured we'd probably go over the findings as well. I gave them a quick review, but not a major review. It's just all about time.
I know.
Time
It's
management.
taking a lot of it.
Okay, we have tonight, we have the legislative items, so it's not quasi-judicial. However, I would like to ask, as we have had in the previous public testimonies, that we're gonna follow the hearing procedures. I don't have like 15 cards, but we would like to hear what you have to say. We would appreciate if you would speak specifically about whichever section of this document or the policies or the proposals that we're going to make, so we can get a clear understanding of where you're going. We'd like you to start, of course, you could please fill out a comment form. If you decide you want to come and speak first and then fill out the comment form after, that's fine. We'd like you to begin all testimony by stating your name. And please, if you just want to just tell us which town you live in, that's fine. You don't have to give us your address. So we have, as Pete said, there is a gigantic packet in the back of the room. So there is a staff report and findings of fact and conclusions and so forth based on our discussions. If you have anything to hand out, please make sure you give that to the staff and then they will give it to us. Should let you know that this will probably be referred, if we make a decision tonight, whether tentative or final, it'll be going to the city commission. So if you do disagree with anything that we've done, then you have another opportunity at the city commission level to chat with them about it. Obviously, if you fail to raise some issue here, there would be sort of an issue in trying to raise it later after the public hearings are closed, correct?
The proceedings before the city commission, the record will be open
Right.
still.
Still,
So folks
yeah.
will have an opportunity to raise issues before the city commission, but the failure to raise an issue before the planning commission or the city commission would preclude you from raising that issue for brand new at the land use board of
So
appeals.
if you got something, get it on the record, because that's the best way to do it. You can't bring it up later after the fact, which we want to make sure that if you do have something, that it gets brought so it can be discussed.
Can I get a clarification?
Yes, sir.
Just for the purposes of this, when we did the planning commission on the Park Place concept, if it wasn't brought up at the planning commission, they couldn't bring it up at the city commission, but this is different. They can bring it up later. What makes the difference?
This is a legislative matter
Okay.
as opposed to a quasi judicial matter. A legislative matter is where we're policy making. A quasi judicial matter is where we are applying standards to a particular proposal. Legislative is more akin to sort of political, sort of how you see and forward-looking, how do you want this regulations to be? Quasi-judicial is where you're acting as a judge, applying policies to the proposal.
And so if it's not brought up
It's
here,
more,
then-
so quasi-judicial is more sort of like you're sitting as a judge evaluating whether the criteria are satisfied.
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, so it's different. So normally I would be reading the whole quasi-judicial land use item, but since it's not that type of a hearing, I will not be reading all that. I'm taking parts of it to talk about how we're going to do our procedure. So I think, as we said, we're going to go through and have public testimony. The record is open. We have a memorandum that we are sending up to the city commission for things that we think still need to be dealt with. We are going to be discussing that. We'll probably be discussing the findings, and we'll be discussing the document, if there's anything else in that. And we may or may not be able to make a tentative decision, or we may make a tentative decision. It just depends. But for the record, I will say we have already received several requests that we will be adjourning this meeting at 9 o'clock. As per my fellow colleagues here. All right, so we have, Debbie, do you want to come up now? Sure.
I do have a letter for each of them.
Okay, thank you.
It's just a little more detail.
Sure. Thank you so much.
If you don't mind, I'm just going to read because I want to be sure that I cover everything that I meant to. Hi, my name is Deborah Dew, and I want to address the committee regarding a short-term vacation rentals in Oregon City, ones that are in single-family dwelling zones, but they're in a private residence. When I first contacted the city in regards to the requirements for vacation rentals, I was told that we didn't need to do anything, that the short-term rental was not considered the same as a bed and breakfast or a hotel, and that the city would look at it no differently than they would be looking at it if I was just renting a room. So we opened one, and it's been about 7 months now. We've just grossed just slightly over $700. In most cases, guests are just there for a weekend. We recently were assisting Clackamas County with coming up with an ordinance to collect their county tax because they don't have one, so VRBO and different companies are not collecting their tax. So I had a sample ordinance that I sent them to help assist them. It was during that time that I realized that things were different with Oregon City than what I thought they were. And so I contacted the city to get more direct information about what the requirements were for a small vacation rental. So I contacted other people in our community that also have VRBOs in their own home, not bed and breakfast, not hotels, just renting a room out. Most of them are not aware that we have the same requirements now as a hotel or a bed and breakfast, and that we need to get a conditional land use permit for $3,952. That's not going to work for people who are wanting to just rent a room out in their home, because it's going to take us 4 years of revenue to come up with enough to apply for a permit for land use, conditional land use permit. My request to you is that you think about this and you look at it and consider what that's going to do for many of us who already have VRBOs in Oregon City who don't want to come and talk to you because they don't want you to find out about them. I couldn't get the people who I talked to come and present to you because they're afraid, because they've invested money now and they've been running them, some of them for a couple of years. And when they find out about this, what we had to do, we had to shut down. We've now canceled and refunded people who were renting, who come down to Main Street of Oregon City and spend their money in the small businesses there and the restaurants, and the money we make, we believe in supporting our community, so we spend our money here. So by closing our VRBO, we now, you yourself will lose revenue because the city will lose the 6% lodging tax that you get from us. The city's businesses can lose a lot of the revenue from our tenants that came. And I'm just not sure that you really meant the intent to be for everybody. And I'm just hoping that maybe you can consider thinking of a private residence in a home when they're renting a portion of their home, that we don't have the same requirements as of a great big company who is doing retail business. They're selling services and they're providing services where all we're doing is giving a place to sleep and a TV and free internet. And so that's basically what I would like to ask you to consider. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
You just did.
The chair.
Oh, you go right ahead. You don't have to ask me.
There's been a lot of controversy about this subject matter. And one of the issues, of course, is the shenanigans that can occur. Somebody comes in from New York, see the Great Pacific Northwest, and they take advantage of your services. Would you agree that those people have to be protected in that they put their trust in the people renting out rooms and things like that, that they will be safe and they'll be public health-wise, they'll be up to standards and things like that. So there's got to be some regulation.
There is regulations, and the people are what's called vetted through, like VRBO. They actually check these people, and they also give us $1 million policy of insurance as a blanket policy, besides the deposits that we take for damage and things like that. In most cases, many of the ones that I'm talking about are right in someone's residence, so they're there as well. So I don't think you'd run into that, that much trouble in those instances. We've had wonderful guests. And it's people who, have the last people we had a trial at the courthouse. Her daughter was murdered in Clackamas County, and they were coming from Michigan to attend the trial. And it's nice to have a home environment, and we could, they could sit out in the backyard and talk about it at night and not be in their hotel room. And it was just a different atmosphere. So, a lot of these people have business right here in Clackamas County and by providing this service to them, they're helping us out, because even though it's not a lot of income, a little bit of income helps with everything, just about. And so it's been hard, because we truthfully invested a lot of money to get this place ready for this. And to have called and checked and to find out, later after we've already gone to the expense of preparing all this, that it is now not cost effective is very disappointing. And it was disappointing to our visitors that we've canceled with. And we did cancel because we believe in following the rules, and these are the rules, so we're hoping you'll change them.
Pete, I don't believe that we're dealing with that particular issue, so to speak, in
Right now, the code does not differentiate between a situation where there's one room in an occupied house and a bed and breakfast with a off-site landlord or an on-site manager who's not a resident of that house. So there's no distinction made. The only definition that applies in the current code is that it's less than 30 days, and that's what triggers the conditional use.
It is very difficult to find any information on your website, to be quite honest. It's not readily available. It's just short-term vacation rental is what it is.
I find that part of the issue has to do with the fact that a lot of people don't know what to ask, and they don't know, are they talking to planning, are they talking to building, are they talking to engineering? It's kind of, you're talking probably more or less to community development department. But we have had, within our process here, we have had people come in and tell us the complete opposite. They feel that having short-term rentals takes away, particularly the ones that are using, room over a garage, that takes away rental property from people who are looking for places to live because they can't find anything because it's too expensive. The city, I know for a fact, has asked VRBO and Airbnb and whatever other organizations are out there as to who is doing it. And of course, they refuse to comply. I mean, we don't have as much muscle as Portland does because Portland's forced them to fess up and say, hey, this is happening. But as far as I know.
But Oregon City does have an ordinance, and actually VRBO is collecting the 6% from us that goes to the city of Oregon City, which unfortunately your city did not even know. So you guys are and should be able to know. I don't think that they report each individual person, but they just pay a flat
The city
sum.
wanted to know each individual.
But you're required to get a business license,
Yes.
and the business license process determined that you needed a conditional use process to go through to authorize it?
No, I didn't realize, that what happened was I didn't realize the 6% was due to Oregon City, and VRBO contacted me and told me, and so then I contacted the city, and that's when they told me, you know what, you might have a problem because you don't have the right to have one unless you have a conditional land use permit.
That's what I was getting at.
Yes.
And that was going to cost you how much?
It's just under $4,000.
$4,000.
And truthfully, it was also, I mean, they didn't come out saying you don't want to do it, but it's a big hassle and there's lots of steps and it's really involved.
It's not a big hassle.
Was basically the way it was.
VRBO said it was a big hassle?
No, someone at the city.
Oh, well, I don't think they would have said that, but,
Well,
They
it turned
did.
out to be a big hassle.
well, again,
So anyway, I
Sorry.
just
Yeah,
thought I would bring it
thank
to your
you very much
attention
for your-
and hope
for your
that you
testimony. We
can look at
appreciate
it.
it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a question that needs to get answered.
yes, it does, because, people should be doing things according to the code, but they don't always,
Well, and
because they don't know. Okay, Paul?
Thank you again. I'm Paul Edgar Kanema. First, I wanted to, in the enclosures that are now part of the record, I wanted you guys to see the appeals court rulings from the Ninth Circuit Court, the city of Boise. And this was about homelessness. And when it came down, one of the things and why it's so important is addressing the need of shelters also into what we're doing in this code revision. Because if you don't have shelters that are available, and a shelter is qualified with a bed, that you can't move somebody off of a public street, park. They could defecate any place they want. They could be doing things. But they already in the city of Portland, when they're trying to do something to control or to protect the environment, the people there are saying, you can't do this, it's against the law, and they're not moving. So for us to be able to have a responsible neighborhood, one of the things I just perceive out of this is that we're going to probably need to create sheltered areas or potentially acquire some lands or do something that is going to be that has shelters. And recently Clackamas County did one for veterans out on 115th just off of Jennifer. And they had they have a centralized kitchen and shower facilities and things like this, and it's pretty nice. And it's an example, though, of the type of efforts that a city like Oregon City is going to have to face and look at it square right in the eye and say, okay, how do we do this? Okay, I thought that there was one particular page in here that you should go to. And by the way, I got this given to me by the county council because I was sitting.
I have it open, so what page do you have?
It is on page 32. And
give us a quick second.
And in it, it says there, cannot prosecute a homeless individual.
One second, we're trying to get that.
We're trying to get to it.
32, there we go. Okay.
For sitting, lying, or sleeping in public. That is as long as that there is no option of a sleeping indoors. The government cannot criminalize indigent people, homeless people, for sleeping outdoors or on public property on the false premise that they have no choice in the matter. So I just thought that this was important, that you should read the whole thing, and that's one thing. Another document that I got, this part of it, is this internal document from Metro, and it's on the housing bond issue. And within it, it starts talking about what is this bond issue that we may be voting on, and what are the obligations, or what is the picture for Clackamas County. There is interestingly a unit code, or number of units that they're hoping to achieve that we're going to create out of monies that would come back into the county. That's 500 units in Clackamas County out of this bonding unit. But if we start trying to build housing, like I've mentioned before, the one that's going on Audie Road, that's $66 million for 216 units. So when you take 216 divided into 66 million, how do we affordably create housing units? And so within this document, they're really saying that they're hoping that they can create housing units for around 230,000. But 230,000 is not sustainable. And this is where I would like to get back to the whole idea, the premise of creating something affordable because of the gross need. They have analyzed the future need for the metropolitan area at 45,000 new affordable housing units. And where they're looking at it, they're saying they can't hardly fit them in Multnomah County or the city of Portland. And all of the eyes are glistening on places like Clackamas County and immediately around us. And so this is just a kind of a reality that we're going to be faced with. And I thought that you should read this interaction. It was between County Commissioner Paul Savas and the Metro Housing people. They don't know yet how they're going to administer it. They don't know exactly how they can make it all work. They just know that there's a need for it, and we've got to come up with something. But the numbers in here and the dialogue in here is something that is important for you guys to understand as we start to look at this whole picture. And my appeal to this is we don't need to go into, I'm in historic Kenema, going in and trying to squeeze ADUs and stuff, or McLaughlin District, or some of these areas, without doing really significant character or cultural harm to the areas that we have that we're trying to protect. What we should be, in my mind, looking at trying to come up with some ideas where we can do it in some gross lands. So on another document that's in here, it was one that I got from going through the Metro Transportation Advisory Policy Committees, and they had a meeting in there where they were explaining how they are going to try to adapt high density into the city of Portland and with transportation. And one of the things that comes out of that document, and it's dated 9/28 at the top, Paul Edgar wrote, and in it, I'm trying to talk about, or I thought it was quite interesting in it, that they are talking about narrow, smaller lots, like creating something like an R1, or in going back to where I talked to you about the possibility of a manufactured home park, but where we really get in there and we create this planned community. And I think that within that mindset, we can, in a clustered development, create a quality of life where we minimize cars, minimize the amount of spaces left for anything, and try to make it incentivized by transit orientation. And we could potentially do some things where we're also talking in the long haul, housing in a industrial or a CI area where we're trying to do job training and housing associated with Clackamas Community College. And I put a reference in here of some property like 10 acres that's owned by Terry Emmerich right off of Beaver Creek Road. And it's adjoining residential area. And that could be master planned and literally create in there affordable housing right next to a place where the high school is right up the street, grade schools, middle schools, where we could, but we're talking about education. We're talking about job skills. We're talking about how to take and help people leverage themselves into a better circumstance. But we want something that's affordable so that we can bring them in off the streets, give them an opportunity to better themselves, educate themselves, but affordable transitional type housing, permanent in the sense that it has the bathrooms and stuff like this, but you may have a central, again, laundry facilities and things for that community, so not every unit has to have duplicated things and not use it all the time. But if we work together intelligently in a plan, we've got to come up with some things that are that are sustainable and don't break the bank. Because if in that housing project the county's doing, where it's 66 million, 30 million is public money. That's yours and my money, tax money, being brought in to buy down the costs of everything. We can't continue to afford to do things like that in this whole picture of trying to create the needed amount of affordable housing for all of us. And we've got to get people off the streets. We've got to have shelters, because if we don't have shelters, we can't even allow the police or anybody to do anything that's responsible for quality of life for every one of the citizens here. So I would propose that we have in our legislation, our goal writing and what we're trying to get done, the ability to look at lands like in that are undeveloped, sitting idle for years, and have them flip zoning so that I could take CI or industrial zoning and put it like out on someplace in maybe South End Road, where we don't have any transportation and a lot of very little infrastructure for sewer and water. But where we have the bus route, like a 33 going right up to the college, this is where we can and should be considering whatever it takes to try to create a way that we can address these things in a sustainable manner, but not necessarily destroy the quality of life of people. I can't imagine my next generation living in towers going up and down elevators and never seeing green grass or trees or experiencing a neighborhood environment. And that's the type of alterations we might be experiencing if we only look at vertical housing units. And I don't think that that's going to be something that I hope my grandchildren or their grandchildren have to worry about or live with, because I'd like to see them have green grass and trees and parks and something beautiful. But thank you very much for allowing me to, I care. I'm trying to find solutions that make sense.
Can I comment on it? Sure. You know, I sat here listening to you, Paul, very well, good presentation. But all I keep thinking when I hear R1s is stacking container boxes on top of each other and central bathrooms and central showers. And I keep thinking it sounds like one of those things that kids stay in when they travel. What are those called?
Hostels?
Hospice place or something like that.
Not a hostel, that's a plant, but a hostel.
Yeah, that's true. So I keep thinking when you talk.
You can do cottage homes, you can do tiny houses,
let me finish.
and you can do it with pretty. Make them pretty with park porches.
But my thought is that it just seems like, I know they tried it at Roseville and they've tried it in other areas in Portland, and all it did was create more crime because people were so stuffed next to each other that they got into fights. And I can't remember the name of the organization, but there was so much crime in there because they were stuffed so close.
There's no crime there.
Well, maybe I've got the wrong one, but it's like the ones in New York and Chicago. You hear about the tenement buildings. It's got everybody stuffed into a small area. That's just the first thing I think of, Paul, when I think of cramming people into R1.
There's a lot of successful co-housing projects throughout.
That's my first thought. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Talking about a housing code.
Well, that's more or less the same thing.
Just my thought when I was listening to it. Oh my God.
Village that they had for women and.
But good job, Paul. I mean, I appreciate what you're saying.
I'm just hoping that this is not going to go, problem's not going to be solved unless we all work together and think positively and creatively.
Well, I hope you would go to all the cities in Clackamas County, because my big issue with this is not Oregon City's problem.
Absolutely.
Or just Oregon City's problem. And you know, unless Gladstone steps up, unless Happy Valley steps up, unless Lake Oswego steps up, we are not going to solve this problem. And,
Never mind.
Yeah, I know, but somebody the other day was asking about, they talked to the police in West Lynn and, you know, did they have very many homeless people there? Well, and the guy apparently replied, well, we don't have any services, so we send them to Oregon City. And I thought, oh, yeah. But, you know, that's neither here nor there because that was secondhand information. But yeah, it's the same issue that we dealt with some years ago when my esteemed colleague in the audience was chair of the Planning Commission, when we were talking about how to put more of, they didn't call it affordable then, but we were calling it low-income housing, and the question came up was, well, what is Oregon City's fair share of this? And we knew that the other cities were not really stepping up. We've also gotten, you know, I've heard a number of complaints about, you know, unfortunately the new apartment complex that we have down by the cove that is market rate. And actually somebody sent me what the rentals are there, that's not affordable. We have some suggestions in our memo to the commission about creating some things. Other jurisdictions apparently can put requirements on buildings to say you have this much housing. My own son in Boise lives in a housing subsidized, so part of it is market rate and the other part is basically based on your income. And, you know, people say, oh, it's cheap to live in Boise. Well, not if you don't have a lot of money. It isn't cheap to live anywhere. So I don't know what the answer is, but I think, you know, if I was thinking as my esteemed colleague, Mr. Bob here at the end, Mr. Mahoney, you know, it gets back to how does everybody pitch in to help solve the problem? And Oregon City is just one little drop in the bucket.
Well, I thank you, and I don't have all of the solutions, nor do I even pretend to have them. All I can tell you is that I'm hoping that I can contribute positively to trying to find solutions that make a difference, because it's like with veterans. Again, 22 veterans commit suicide every day. and a lot of them they're despondent.
When's that one going, that Northwest Housing Alternatives, when is that? I thought they were going to break ground already.
Well,
It's later this week.
they're supposed to be close at hand, so
Okay,
anyway,
so it's coming.
It's within the next 10 days. I know
Yeah,
that.
I watch it often.
thank you.
I can't be there because I'm.
Andrew. I'm assuming your email here is bridgeviewmanagement.com, because I wrote it out because I know not everybody has the best hand, but it's staff, I don't know if staff can read that, so I just wrote it out.
Okay.
Hi there.
Hi. So my name's Andrew Kramer. I'm here tonight on behalf of Claremont Mobile Home Park. I have mainly just a comment at this point. I've been working with the planning staff, and so at this point, so I'm just going to read this out for you guys. So basically, one of the most important features, I think, of manufactured housing parks is the fact that they do contain quite a bit of open space, particularly relative to other multifamily developments. And within that, you also have sort of individualized open space. People have their own yards, their own parking. And I work in a variety of manufactured home parks in the Northwest, and I think preserving this is very important. And I brought this up with Pete and some of the planning staff, and I submitted I guess sort of a suggested code language to the changes, and they came back with actually better language. So basically, I think that now the most current iteration of the revised code, and I'm referencing 17.20.0650, which is the manufactured housing parks section. Essentially, the revised code preserves the open spaces, but I would add that this is one of the most critical affordable housing options available to any community. Oregon City is no exception. And I would add to that, it's really, to my knowledge, the only way that it's the only affordable home ownership option that exists at this point. So anything that can be done to preserve the character and the sort of safety of these communities, but also facilitate their growth and to cultivate more of them if at all possible. So the current code, in my opinion, does this. It allows the incorporation of park setbacks as well as individual unit setbacks into the landscaped area requirements within the code, and I think that will allow hopefully new parks to be developed, but also existing parks will be able to add additional units as a result of this. And really, this was just a clarification. It didn't take. It was essentially just making sure that everyone was on the same page as far as what these definitions were. And so I think that Pete and the staff did a really good job of incorporating that without having to make any substantive changes, more just really sort of adding a little bit of language specific to mobile home parks, but also kind of from a code perspective doesn't sort of close one door and open 7 other ones. So I really think it drills down specifically on manufactured home parks, and I think it's going to allow for the preservation of these of this as a housing option within the city, and in doing so, I think there's possibilities now to be able to add more of these types of projects in the future. So that's really it. Thank you.
Is there any provision in Claremont now to add additional units?
We're looking into it. I think certainly with sort of a more robust definition of and there's a couple other things, but the open space was a big one, and I think now that we can, we have sort of agreement on what constitutes open space within these communities, I think that it certainly makes it a viable option, which is really exciting.
Question. What would you think if the public went out and, say, bought 25, 50 acres and developed it, and then invited people to move their unit that they owned onto a location and lease it back from the city or the county for a date certain, maybe 1 year, 5 years, whatever, the longevity of the life expectancy of the unit, and participated in a buy-off of the property, the investment that the public had in the property, and thereby assuring the fact that they wouldn't be asked to leave because they got a lease on the property. Would that be innovative to the point where it would open up some of these parks? Because I know an investment in a park by a private investor, that's quite a chunk of change.
Indeed.
The public is going to spend money on these things anyway, not necessarily mobile parks, but they're going to spend money on low-cost housing, one way or another.
Yes.
And it's either going to be a beehive, or it's going to be a space where somebody can call their own,
yes,
because they're participating in the purchase of the property on a buyback lease arrangement. Mm-hmm. Is that feasible?
I think it could be. I think with what I try and do in housing is take problems away from someone seeking housing. I think a problem often with really anything you see, like within tiny homes or within park model housing or manufactured housing, in trying to solve a problem, we introduce more. So if I'm going to provide a piece of land for someone who has $5,000 to put into their home, I've created more problems for them, because now they have to find out how are they going to transport that home, how are they going to set that home up, how are they going to make sure it's adequately connected to utilities. So even if take a perfectly subdivided lot with utility connections ready to go, you're still creating, it's not a solution for, and so I think in my experience, you really need to take that, you need to bring that home in, you need to set that home up and hand somebody keys and have a financing solution in place for them when they walk in that door. So, I mean, that's kind of, in my experience in manufactured housing, that's how I've made it work. Sort of developing land and then sort of saying, all right, cut the ribbon, let's bring the houses in. It just doesn't, and I could be, this is just my opinion, but it doesn't seem to work that way. You really need to, so to answer your question, absolutely. If there's a way to, and the gentleman before me was referencing $230,000 a unit. With manufactured housing, it's a fraction of that. I just did a project in Centralia where we did, it was about 20 units, and my cost to do it was probably, and this includes the home, I think I was at about $65,000 a unit. And that's from raw land and that included all the fees that the city charged me. So I think it's a fraction of the cost of what we all agree on is like, if you're doing like a CMU block building for low income housing, $230 a unit, that sounds about right to me. That might even be low.
Well, there's some very nice, expensive manufactured homes that I have seen at the factory.
Yes.
People, I mean, so not everybody customizes them, but they have quite a range, and they're not cheap.
No, they aren't always. But I will say if you can standardize something, if you can do, if any of the manufacturers, I manufacture homes. If you do the same thing 50 times or 100 times, sure, your costs plummet, because now you're dealing with standardization is key in any manufacturing. So if the city decided to take on a project like that where you're going to add 300 units, 400 units, I would say manufactured housing is going to be hands down the most affordable way to do it. I would encourage you to look at removing the obstacles to I always call them to my customers, to my clients, which are the people who are going to live in these homes ultimately. And the best way I found to do that is you provide them with every solution that they need and don't create new problems for them. So give them that home. And if they have $5,000, great. You take that as a down payment, but you don't say now go to a community credit union or go to the Berkshire Capital where they charge 15% interest, remove all those products, because that's where, and then it is sustainable. It really is. If you have, and not even in like a 30-year perspective, it's sustainable on 3, 4, 5, 7 years.
Well, how sustainable are $450,000 homes? Sooner or later, people are just going to price themselves out of the market. And 1% can afford that kind of a.
I'm not a developer. I'm not a home developer, so I agree with you right off the bat.
You're with money, and it all boils down to cost.
Yes.
It all boils down to the cost of providing a service.
And I think but if you can, to do what you're suggesting, I would say, deliver a finished product. And by finished product, I mean also with some way that someone with a small amount of money.
Well, let's take it to the, like you're saying. I mean, if it was public housing, we would go in and build the housing, and then we'd move people in that could qualify, okay? But go ahead and plat the property. When I say plat, I use that advisedly. Provide all the services, including the unit.
Yes.
And say, okay, now it's your turn to participate with us and put together some sort of financial program.
Yes.
Where they could participate.
Yes.
And then you move people into affordable housing.
Yes.
Because it is affordable.
Yes.
And the one thing I've noticed about this whole mess is this going to cost us more not to solve it than it is if we let it continue.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
And that's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, I imagine, and I agree. And I think there are what you're describing, I personally have done. I have colleagues who've done the same thing, where you essentially deliver a complete package, and then obviously my financial motivation would be different from the planning commission's, but in the end, it's kind of the same. You create a solution, you generate an acceptable return for the city, but ultimately, one thing I can say with almost certainty is that of the affordable housing options before you guys, some sort of manufactured solution is going to, and depending on the cost of land, but we've been talking about Clackamas County and outlying Oregon City, the cost of land would not impact this to the point that it would drive the cost, because the density of this is lower, but we've got some nice chunks of land that we could make something like this work. And you need a 2,500 foot lot, even smaller. You could get down to, we have designs for 2-bedroom units that are 400, 360 square feet. It all comes down to layout. So, then the 1,500 foot lot could work just fine.
Bob, I'm wondering if the land that the county is contemplating selling when they get rid of Clackamas Heights would be suitable. You could get a little more density in there rather than building anything that's not a high-rise area. And I'd hate to see really high-rise type buildings built there, because it's not the same, but they might be able to get more units in there with a very nicely laid out manufactured dwelling part.
Now, the one thing that bothers me.
Only one?
We're talking, well, there's 7 or 6.
Yeah, I see that.
The one thing that really fries me is that we're sitting in this room here, we're all pretty intelligent people, and we can't solve this problem. That bothers me. And something is going to happen that's really critical. It's going to have to get worse before it gets better. Before we solve this problem. If we'd have done it before things got worse, and maybe it just goes with the territory. It's got to get so bad that we finally reach out, here, take my hand, I got that, And it bothers me to think that mothers with children are sleeping in cars. And when we could be solving that problem.
Any questions for Andrew?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Pete, just as a postscript, Damon was kind enough to just point me to page 225 because I forgot which page it was on. So what did we change in here that?
Of the red line version?
Well, yeah, I'm looking at the red line version. I don't see much of a modification, so I'm trying. Well, yeah, I see that, but. So was it just the change to the open space requirement? On 226?
It has to do on the next page on 226, yes, to specify that landscaping can include private space. It's under 6. Minimum of 200 square feet of open space for each unit in the park, or a minimum of 5,000 square feet, whichever is greater shall be provided. And then what cannot be considered are streets, access drives, and parking lots, but
So
you can include landscaping and lawn area, recreational amenities, and hard surface pedestrian paths.
So you're basically saying that the minimum would be something about the size of a standard lot in the original plat, which is about 5,000 square feet?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
35.
Yeah, okay. And this makes it better?
There was no distinction about what qualified as open space.
Open space, okay. All right, gotcha. Just needed that clarified.
Well, there was also no, we've also made it clear that modifications to existing parks are type 2. And that
Correct.
wasn't, how you went about modifying a park wasn't clear.
Oh, I see, okay.
So
Yeah,
I think
that's what I think.
I'm not sure that it streamlined it because it made it more clear.
Okay. Okay. Just that they said you were working with, Andrew said he had submitted some comments and your stuff was so much better, and I thought, okay, well, I thought we'd already fixed it. Oh, anyway, okay. Just curious.
Yeah, Andrew's comments were in a prior
Right,
attachment,
yeah.
so.
Yeah, that was like 800 pages ago. I can't remember that far back now. Mike?
Good evening, Mike Mitchell. I'm an Oregon City resident. First off, I want to say that you all have been handed an impossible job. This is too big. This should have been knocked down into much more bite-sized chunks. And what I'm worried about is...
Said that earlier.
I realize, pardon?
We said that earlier.
Yeah, I'm afraid with as much opportunity that you provided, and I applaud this, the opportunity to provide for public input, we've really discouraged public input because, let's face facts, very few people in this town are going to spend the amount of time in the weeds that the 7 of you are willing to do. Eyes glaze over 10 or 12 pages in, and we have ended up with less public comment than we should have had because of the size of this. Just my thought.
Preaching to the choir.
And I realize I was, but I think it needs to be said.
We could probably spend this much time on flag lots alone.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We started out with one little thing,
good that we
and
didn't,
then
yeah.
it sort of morphed into, well, gee, let's clean up the entire code while we're at it. And I thought we should have separated the two things and dealt with them one at a time, but that's water under the bridge.
One particular aspect that I heard tonight, and I saw it, I read it before and I saw it again tonight, and I wasn't going to bring this up tonight. I was going to wait and bring it up before the commission, but out of respect to all of you, you deserve to hear it rather than be surprised. Not that it's a major deal, but what I'm concerned about is the owner occupancy requirement on ADUs. I don't disagree with the goal. I agree with what you're trying to accomplish. I agree with the goal. But what bothers me more is when we put something in our code that we can't enforce. So if that's in the code, are you going to send code enforcement, not you, are we, the collective we, going to send code enforcement around with the deed and ask for ID and put it on our calendar and then come back in 7.5 months and make sure that somebody's there? We're putting something in there that can't be enforced. And I think we can talk about our street tree ordinance and enforcement issues that have come up with that and the hard feelings that causes. So I just wanted to bring that up as a caution. As I said, I don't disagree with what you're trying to get to, but I really don't think we should put something in that can't be enforced. Thank you.
Well, if you agree with the goal, what would be, I'm totally open to hearing some other options.
I'll be honest, Denise, I don't think it's going to be a problem. When you have the study done by professionals that the end result of all of this is going to be 160 additional units of all types, all across the city. We're not going to sprout a forest of non-owner occupied ADUs. It's not going to happen. The history of other cities like Portland, where they have bent over backwards to try to encourage ADUs and very few are being built. Yeah. if we were going to have a city full of ADU, non-owner occupied ADUs, then we might have to look at it. But we're not going to get to that situation. It's just not going to be enough of an issue to put something in our code that we could, that we can't reasonably enforce.
Go ahead, Vern.
I want to thank you because you kind of took my thunder away. There's been a lot of conversation going on what's the number one issue with this code that we're proposing, and it's like bubble gum. It just gets bigger every day. The number one issue is owner-occupied ADUs. It just won't fly. You've got to allow the owner of that, whether he's a residential owner looking for a place to live, and put an ADU to help a more affordable housing. If you put the occupancy requirement that he's got to live there for 7 months, how do you enforce it is your issue, is a big issue. And it's just unbelievable. You're going to drive any investors away that want to invest in housing, rental housing in Oregon City.
Yeah, there's nothing else anywhere in our code in that requires or does not allow someone to rent their property.
Absolutely. I agree that line item should be struck.
Well, we still have the
6 months
opportunity
ago
to change it.
That's why I wanted to bring it up. Damon, did you have a?
Well, I was just going to say, it's easier to ease a restriction than to tighten it up. So if 10 years from now, we see that there's 52 ADUs and it's not a big deal, it's easy to say, look around and go, yeah, we haven't really been checking on who lives there. Let's just strike it. But if we get rid of it and California goes through a crazy housing boom again, and people are selling their quarter-acre houses for $6 million and buying up whole blocks of subdivisions up here, and renting them out in vast droves, which has happened on occasion. I know at least 2 people that bought 5 houses when they sold their house in California. And they're living high on the hog on the rent of the other 4 and living in the 5th one. So it's...
And providing a place where 4 other families can live.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And I don't have a problem with that necessarily, but what I'm saying is that if it does become a problem, and that'll be defined by whoever the people are in charge at that point in time, then they have something to start enforcing. Because to say, from now on, ADUs have to be owner-occupied, and we've already done 80% depth in ADUs, then it's invalid at that point too, because you can't go back and retroactively say, no, now you have to move back in. So, it's just like my issue about off-street parking. If you don't require off-street parking now, you can't go back and put it in. You have to tear houses down and rebuild them. So, it's easy to ease it, but it's hard to make it tighter. So that's my thought about the whole owner occupancy.
And Mike, you made one comment after somebody said California got from any state coming by and then they rent out the other houses you said and provide housing for other people, except they put them at the prices of the going rate, and they may still make a big profit off it enough to, so these people who are going there are still going to pay high prices, rental there or rental here. It's still, they're all going to charge as high as they can.
I didn't mean to imply that that's an affordable housing solution.
Okay,
it's just a housing solution.
Right. You should go out in public, speak about this.
Yeah, there's a couple, well, at least there's a number of ADUs that are being used for short-term rentals. So I know that for a fact. I mean, people are coming and going and coming and going, and but I'm not saying everybody's doing that. Not everybody's going to build one. I know someone who built one, and their mother-in-law lives there. But, Granny passes away, and then, gee, well, what do we do with this space? Our kids aren't going to move back, so let's rent it out. Let's have a short. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying these are the various scenarios that I know that are already existing in Oregon City. And one of the things we need to do is we are behind the 8 ball in terms of coming up with a solution if the city's interested in making some sort of money off of, you know, getting it's not just about the hotel motel tax. There's a whole big issue that needs to be discussed, I think, in terms of short-term rentals, you know, what effect that has on the livability, which is one of our goals here. Does it? I don't know. I can only tell you, having lived in 2 communities that were very, very vacation-oriented, sometimes it was good, sometimes it was terrible, and we had to call the police because 2-3 doors down from us, they were having a huge, I'm not saying this is going to happen in Oregon City, but in a ski town, oh my God. You know, it depends. Again, you know, everybody is going to, you know, it has not been a community discussion. It needs to be a community discussion before we start writing code to say, okay, we are going to have Airbnbs or VRBOs or, you know, or whatever the next, or whatever the next angle is going to be, because I'm sure there's something now, you know, they're talking about micro hotels, which are basically like a closet and you stay there and, you know, I don't know what it is. But anyway, but I appreciate your comments, and it's something this commission can reconsider. That's just our first shot at the apple.
Yep.
But I appreciate your bringing it up here.
Thank you.
We don't like being blindsided. All right, going once, going twice. Anybody else want to say anything? Adam, I see you sitting there. He's laughing. He's going like, no thanks. Very smart man. Anybody else? He said you'll wait. For what?
The right time.
Rents to come down.
Because if we close the public hearing.
Well, there'll be other opportunities.
Right, so anybody object on the line?
Go for it.
Okay, all right, we're gonna close the public hearing on legislative item 18-4001.
So I just want to say that off the top, I only got through 250 pages of this. So I'm not prepared to vote yea or nay on it until I get a chance to finish going through it.
I got through about 100, almost 200.
So,
do you want to talk about the memo?
yeah, I think that's a useful thing. And there is at least one thing that we went through that I do want to talk about, because it kind of has to do with ADUs.
Okay.
So I don't know, do we want to do that now or do the memo and then?
Let's do that now.
Okay.
And then we'll come back, we can come back. Is that okay, Bob and Zach and Vern and, see, I forget all their names. Paul and Tom.
I'm Tom way down here.
It's been a long week, folks. That's all I can tell you.
There it is.
Pardon?
It's been a long week.
I know, it's been a long week. That's what I'm saying. It's Monday.
Okay.
Okay, so the thing you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, I want to find the page.
He's finding it, okay. While you're doing that, Carrie, I have a question. Sure. I heard the excellent NPR report, or I should say Oregon Public Broadcasting report, about the court case that Paul brought up. And two things that I heard, because I was listening very intently, was that nobody has made a determination yet whether that ruling is going to set a precedent for Portland or anything that's going on in Oregon. Number two, I heard Portland commenting that they were going to, not that I subscribe to what Portland does, because you know how I feel about that they're still going to do whatever they're going to do. I don't know I know it's the Ninth Cert, but I'm not exactly sure exactly what bearing that has. I know that in this community so far, I have not seen any tents on the sidewalk or here and there. I know people are sleeping in various and sundry places, but I haven't seen tent cities appearing. So I don't know what its applicability would be unless somebody decides to sue one of the jurisdictions within the broad range of the Ninth Circuit Court.
So.
And I know there's no real answer.
So this opinion deals with Boise passed an ordinance.
Right.
That prohibited sleeping and standing on a sidewalk.
Standing too?
What?
Standing or just sleeping?
Well, sitting for long periods of time, standing, standing, leaning against a building for a long period of time.
Okay.
I mean, it was a sit-stand ordinance,
It's like
right?
sit-lie.
Yeah, and so it's an ordinance that was passed that was challenged.
Right.
So if the city doesn't pass an ordinance, right, there won't be this kind of case, right?
That was my thought.
But it's, so that's one point. The other point is that in the paragraph right before the part that Paul quoted, it says, "We in no way dictate that to the city that it must provide sufficient shelter for the homeless or allow anyone who wishes to sit, lie, or sleep on the streets at any time, at any place." So this decision doesn't say all cities have to provide homeless shelters immediately. It is advisable, I think what this decision stands for is the idea that it is advisable that a city do this if it wants to have more regulation of the streets.
Right.
Because you can't take somebody to jail. You can't find somebody in violation just because they are homeless. If they trespass, if they engage in some other criminal activity,
That's a different story.
that's a different story.
Yeah.
And it doesn't change the city's ability to implement its criminal regulations citywide.
Well, what I saw just briefly in that is that is particularly can't do it if you've given them no alternative. And so if they've got a place to go, you can say, you need to stop leaning against the building and go to this place. But if it's, you need to stop leaning against the building or else, then.
Or else you're going to jail.
Yeah.
So what if you tell them, hey, stop lying on or sleeping here on this place you can go to, and they say no, then that's.
Yeah, then it becomes.
Well, I mean, but so I don't think that this has a lot of direct application to planning matters generally, other than it is instructive that shelters are the alternative, and I mean, and that is
That's what I heard in the report that was on the radio. That was my takeaway.
Yeah.
It wasn't saying, do this or else. And we don't have, as far as I know, we don't have a code like that. I know the city of Portland does, but whether they have alternative housing available, I don't know. A lot of people don't want to do it. So did you find since I was killing time?
So the section I'm concerned about is on page 75. It's 16-08-095.
I wondered if that was concerned.
The prohibition on additional private restrictions on housing types.
So involving CCNRs. So what he's talking about is conditions, covenants, and restrictions that are legal instruments in some subdivisions.
Right.
And I guess, my issue is it seems like you're actually instructing them to say that ADUs and internal conversions are doable, as opposed to just being silent on the matter.
I don't know how they can force somebody to put that in the CCNRs.
Well, and I guess the other thing is when I was talking about off-street parking and driveways and garages, the response I got back was, market forces will drive the issue of there being driveways and garages. So if market forces drive our needs, then wouldn't market forces drive whether or not ADUs and internal conversions are part of a CCNR or not? And why are we messing with private development?
We mess with private development.
Well, I know we do it all the time, but I'm just saying I could see if the language said that CCNRs cannot prohibit ADUs and internal conversions, but the way this is written is they shall explicitly permit them, which means that you're almost telling them, and if you've got enough land, build an ADU. I mean, it almost reads that way, and
But Damon, wouldn't you agree that if we don't make any provisions to allow for ADUs, CCNRs wouldn't take the place? They're not the dominant regulation. the city's zoning ordinance is.
Right.
So what difference does it make if they include them that you must? They're not gonna get a building permit for them if we don't allow them.
Well, I understand that.
I don't understand how we can require that if somebody wants to put a private covenant and restriction on their property that, for whatever reason, let's just say it is this, how do we legally tell somebody what they can't?
We do it all the time.
Well, I know, but this is like in a development, and they say, okay, you can't have clotheslines, which some of the developments do. You can't have a clothesline in the front yard or whatever it is.
You can't use this color paint. You can't have this sort of fountain in your front. You can't, I mean, we're not restricting those.
Is this legal? Can we do?
Yeah, I mean, it's.
Yes. So we look at this as, when I looked at it with staff, we looked at it as the idea that additional accessory dwelling units, duplexes, triplexes are a choice that everybody ought to have the opportunity to make. And that a subdivider, I mean, the only time this will ever be enforced is as part of review of a subdivision plat. And we review CC&Rs as part of a subdivision plat all the time. We do it in order to make sure that the landscaping is there and the maintenance of the landscaping is adequate and the stormwater facilities are in the right place. And I mean, so we review CC&Rs as a practice. So the only time this is going to come up is in that review of the CC&Rs. And we look at it in the same way we look at landscaping maintenance. It's that people who buy these lots have the opportunity to offset the cost of this land in a shared way because that furthers the health, safety, and welfare of our community. And that is something we are allowed to regulate within our police powers because nothing prohibits us from doing it.
Yeah,
And the other thing that's important to note is this is perspective only. We're not going to alter pre-existing restrictions.
Yeah. No, I understand.
So,
no problem with that.
That's why it is that way. And I can appreciate that you don't like the term explicitly permitted. I don't read that to mean that has to be an affirmative statement in the CC&Rs. The reason we put it that way is because we didn't want somebody to try to do a creative go-around and say, use some kind of wishy-washy language other than not permit. We wanted to have as broad of authority as we could, and we weren't thinking that you have to explicitly say in your CC&Rs that all units are allowed to have an accessory dwelling unit. I mean, I can appreciate that you think that, and I'm fine if you want to reverse it.
I agree with you.
I mean, to me, I can see if what you're trying to say is you don't want CC&Rs to come in and say you can't have them because that cuts off each subdivision's land, availability. But I think it'd be better if it was like the CC&Rs cannot explicitly exclude or, something like that, just because,
Well, it could be shall not prohibit.
Yeah, that.
If you like that way better, that's,
Yeah,
I can live with that.
Yeah, that just, because the way I read it, it was almost like you were saying, line 1 of the CC&R is you can have an ADU and it's just, it almost seems like you're pushing them, but shall not prohibit, I have no problem with that. Yeah.
Well, I think just the way Carrie suggested, it gives someone the option. They don't have to do one.
Right.
But if they want to, they're not prohibited from
the market will let them do what they need to do.
Just a point of clarification, it sounds like you could say that they're not prohibited, but you could regulate them in CC&Rs in other ways.
That's probably true.
So what do we want to say? Do we want it to ensure that our ordinance is
explicitly permits stronger?
Yeah.
If they want it, they want it. If they don't want it, they shouldn't be forced to have it if they don't want it.
It's not retroactive back to existing CC&Rs.
Yeah.
God, I wouldn't want it.
Somebody asked me about that particular section about a week ago, and I said, I'm not really sure what it means. So they thought it applied across the board, and I said, no, I think it only applies to subdivisions. So the question I had was, so if I want to rent out tomorrow and put a deed restriction on my personal property that says you can't divide this property or put an ADU on, I said, you can do whatever you want on your individual property. It's just the enforceability of it is going to be the tricky part. The city will not enforce your private deed restriction.
It goes to
Well,
court.
the city's never going to enforce a private
Right.
deed restriction,
Right.
except for, the city's not going to give building permits to subdividers who don't have this, who were to have this provision in their CCNRs.
Right.
And we won't give you a building permit. I mean, that's how it
It'll
will
work,
be
yeah.
enforced.
Okay.
But it's after January 1st, 2019 is the date we've got here.
Right.
We can change the date. But the idea is that this is going to be prospective, and this is to ensure that everybody has an opportunity to do what the zoning code provides
Yeah.
that people should be, have an opportunity to do.
Yeah, so I guess the question is, how are people with the words explicitly permit versus shall not prohibit?
Tom?
You lost me on the last part of it.
No, he's asking what might differ.
Yours was,
Shall not prohibit versus their language of explicitly permit.
I like yours better than that.
Okay.
Sorry, I just can't repeat it all.
Permit is fine, but, we're not gaining any ground when we deal with these little side issues.
True.
We're gonna be 2019 before we even make a recommendation,
That's what
or
it's-
later.
Put it off till
He
2020.
asked,
Forget that minor stuff. I agree, it's better.
he asked if
But
he
it
could
doesn't
bring it
put
up.
us down the road any further than we started today.
We're
It's the
further down
language
the
that
road than we
kills
were
me.
last time.
Okay.
Which direction down the road?
Yeah,
Straight ahead down the road. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
In 2020.
No, I didn't say when.
You know I'm on,
Okay,
Sure.
Paul, do you have any objection to
I
that
have no
change?
comment.
Okay, no comment. Zach?
I like the stronger.
Okay. Bob?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay, so I think we're okay. Zach wants it stronger.
So was that a vote as a strong?
That's a
like it
straw
is?
vote to
Keep
make
it
the
strong.
change the way Damon suggested it.
The way Damon suggested, good.
okay.
Okay, all right, so let's get to the memo.
Okay, yep, and that was the only big issue I saw.
Okay, so the memo. We have any comments about the memo?
My quickest comment was, should I find it?
Memo for me? It's out the door. I disagree entirely.
Okay, so
We do not explore. I explicitly said I would not vote for this. Unless that was in there about the tree, and now they're saying explore. That's not
well,
good
we
enough
can
for
come
me.
up with some other language.
I know,
though.
but it's not good enough for me.
That's one right there. Okay, so
So
we
it's
got
out the
one.
The explore rezoning of exist, I think it's strongly recommend versus explore.
And even recommending, I don't agree with that.
Well,
We're
that's
talking about,
manufactured home.
we're talking about page 2, rezoning of existing it's not Mac parks, manufactured home parks.
On that one, just following up, Damon, I like the idea of changing the last sentence, the last chunk of the last sentence. It says which does not allow for development and other uses. I think we could get creative and could say like prioritizes maintaining the character or low cost or something like that. But otherwise, I like it.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion.
In case we can fit in like some other housing types in
Like,
this use.
like tiny house clusters or whatever.
In
yeah.
a
Or cottage.
manufactured dwelling park, put different types of housing in it.
If there's a different way that we can have a low-cost option in a manufactured housing type without being so specific that it has to be manufactured housing, yeah.
Okay, so do you get that, Pete?
Yeah, so if we are going to look at a zoning designation explicitly for manufactured home parks, it would also entertain other housing types as well?
Just this last sentence,
Yeah.
right? So housing parks to a zoning designation that, and then put some boundaries to what that is.
Oh, good.
How you could categorize manufactured housing.
That allow alternative, low cost,
Right.
housing
Where would you
options.
put that, Zach?
Literally like striking the last like 6 words.
Okay, so which does not allow, you're saying
Right.
strike that?
Correct.
And you are recommending it replace with?
Which that prioritizes yada, yada, yada.
Low cost, affordable housing.
Low cost, affordable housing, yeah.
Got it. I think that's good.
Could I ask for a quick review on what happened there? Zach's voice doesn't.
Oh, I'm basically trying to give a little room so that we're not being prescriptive in manufactured housing and saying we could consider
Okay,
other
your
types.
topic was manufacturing housing.
It's on
in this letter.
top of page 2, first paragraph, explore rezoning of existing manufactured home parks. So page 2,
Yeah, he's got it.
he's got it? Okay, so what he's saying is that strike after the last sentence, it says manufactured home parks to zoning designation, strike which does not allow for development into other uses, so strike that.
Yep, he got it. I wrote and put it too.
Yeah, so he's suggesting that we, I agree, the word explore, I'd like to see it be more of an action rather than explore means kind of like, okay, we might look at it today, but we might not look at it.
Exactly.
I'm not sure what word that is. Bob, help me out here.
I think strongly recommend.
I think explore is the right word. I know what you're saying. Stronger word than explore.
Yeah, stronger
Urgently
word.
explore.
Investigate?
No, because investigate doesn't,
Pursues.
I want to see the words have some action at the end so it just doesn't get lost in the ether.
Which
I mean, I think we said that this is important and this needs to happen like right away.
I think move forward with regulations. Prohibits, yeah.
And this may well be tied to implementation of
If they want to
comprehensive
throw
plan.
out
But I think
wordsmithing,
That's fine. Anything that's tied up with that, we have to all go forth in moss. But I think move forward with is probably forward a lot more.
Yeah, it could be, and it should say somewhere on here that we feel that maybe it's the re-altering of the paragraph. So we have update the comprehensive plan, which would include, this one, rezoning that.
On the comprehensive plan, Denise,
Yes?
I think we ought to make some reference to the budget.
It's in there.
Yeah.
I've lost my bullet.
Oh, yeah, the last sentence.
Adequate funding.
Oh, okay, fine.
The last bullet?
Well, the last sentence on that, which talks about that there be adequate funding.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, I think that sentence needs to be a little bit, not the sentence, but that paragraph should be first, updating the comprehensive plan, because some of these other things kind of come under that purview. I want that front and center.
You move that paragraph to the front of the.
Yeah, before it says explore, put updating the comprehensive plan up at the top
On that page.
on that page.
Yeah, this is probably a subtext or subcategory.
Because I think, updating the plan, including budget items, and, this item would include being part of that.
So one other thing, and I realize I'm probably an outlier here, is I think this does a good job of collecting a lot of our topics, but frankly, I think it would be stronger if it was really specific to affordable housing or equitable housing, and instead of being so broad and trying to include tree mitigation stuff.
Well, I think it's, like I said, if we changed where this is, and then this, like, the tree mitigation and the tree thing and the UGB, I think as part of the comprehensive plan update, the UGMA should be updated as well, because those two things are tied together. And then we could say, we also looked at these things and make that a separate
If we could
section.
include something like that, that said we also looked at, like,
Yeah.
and as some separation,
Yeah,
I would appreciate that.
I thought it just needed to be reordered. I agree with you. Because it was kind of like, okay, we're here, and that's okay. That's why you asked us to look at it.
Doesn't this go along with what Mike said earlier when he was up there, was the fact that this is so big and so much, we're including so much even regarding tree mitigation, all this, that it's hard for them to even consider this one, with all this there too.
Well, we're going to urge the city commission to take as much time as we did.
Oh, they won't.
Well, it doesn't matter whether we think they
They're in a
won't.
rush to get new
We're going to
officers.
urge them to do it.
So Denise, just so I'm clear, you're saying move the comprehensive plan part up to the front and then make these manufactured home parks, tree mitigation fees,
No.
subheadings?
What I was saying is that move the paragraph that says updating the comp plan, put that as the first paragraph, and then some sentence that says about this rezoning of to me, that's underneath the updating of the comprehensive plan. It's a separate paragraph, but it's also topic area of a comp plan update.
A clarification, first paragraph of second page?
Yep.
Yes, and then the tree mitigation and the tree removal thing, that would go to those get moved down to say, we also looked at these items, which we'd like you to take a look at.
These issues were brought
Brought forward
and
as part of this process, but not, so it's, as Zach was saying, it separates them a little bit.
And the UGMA would go before the tree stuff.
It separates and prioritizes them in
Sort of. Not
order.
We're not really saying they're priority in order, but obviously the comp plan, the other one I wanted to fix was this explore regulations to prohibit significant tree removal. I think, again, explore is not the right word, but it kind of goes along with this comp plan update thing, the UGMA update, because we'd like to have the county help us do this.
I thought that was included in there the last time we spoke 2 weeks ago.
There is, some of it is, but not
Yeah,
all.
some of it is, but not all.
This is-
And those two things
I'm a
tie
no vote definitely
together.
without that in there.
Yeah. No, this is, the stuff we put in is in,
But-
this is the extra stuff that happens around trees.
Yeah.
So,
I just don't like the sound of explore. That means they're
Well,
gonna,
that's what I'm
they're gonna get
suggesting,
out
is
of
that we
it.
change the explore part. And what I can do is I can come in and I can sit down with
Study,
Pete
give them
and
explore.
we
same
can
thing.
brainstorm with our two fresh brains later
About the same.
and reorganize this and then bring it back to the commission.
Yeah. And I'd say in general, this does capture the things we've been talking about that aren't necessarily directly code issues.
Right, but I think the other one that to me is the update the UGB agreement, because I don't know when the last time it was updated, but okay, 1990. Yeah, circumstances have been massive, and that document needs to be a living document that couples with the comprehensive plan so that we're both on the same page. And when we get the Clackamas County telling us, oh, well, there's nothing we can do, it seems like we need to work together as jurisdictions to make this UGB transition work for both parties, not one going, oh, we can't do anything, and the other one going, well, we can't do anything because we think it's the county, and the county goes, oh, it's all you.
Yeah.
So somehow or another, those two last paragraphs need to be linked together. So that's just,
There are two things that drive a developer nuts, and we've heard it time and time again. Time and money. So what do? We stretch it out, make it more expensive, and we keep adding on the assistance development fees, which makes it more expensive.
yeah, we don't have any control of that.
Well, that's what we do.
As a planning commission, we have control of you.
Oh, well, we're making recommendations now about affordable housing and equitable housing. Both of those subjects are affected by time and money. So if we can somehow streamline our application and permit process to drive that time down and still enforce our regulations and sort of just take a step back and look at this again and quit trying to be a cash register.
I'm not trying to be a cash register
Well, I mean
personally.
the city. Quit trying to be a cash register and what we want to do is make the housing that's built in Oregon City affordable and quit piling on 4th and 1.
Okay, so say that to the camera because you're looking at us like we
I'm
have
looking at my profile.
control of that.
I'm doing my profile here, but you see what I'm getting at?
Oh, I totally get it.
If we keep making the systems development fees and stretch out the time for decisions that we know are inevitable, instead of waiting for 6 weeks, make them when they're put together. We're smart enough to do this. We've done it before. 3 of us have done it before, and 1 of us is still doing it, looking at these reviews. And you know what the answer is. But you get into this governmental process, you get lost in the fog, and all of a sudden you got 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months to make a decision that, is driving developers crazy. It's costing them money. They pass it on to the consumer. A house is another $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. So we got to look at this real hard and see how can we streamline this process.
I think the city staff has done a good job of streamlining that. What I find the difficulty is that the reason that some of these things get stretched out, and I could give you a very specific example, is because the applicant didn't follow the directions. And then they submitted something and it wasn't,
Well, this is true.
and I
too.
mean, there's two sides of that story.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
true.
So the staff, I think, goes a long way in sitting down with an applicant, going over in a pre-app, this is what we'd like you to do, but I agree with you on the SDCs. Did I tell you this quick story? I just got a water bill where there was 0 water usage, 0. The water bill was still $101.57, and do you know what all of those fees were? Those were all the SDC fees. We did not spend any money for water usage. I looked at that bill and I just about lost my mind.
Yeah.
I said $101, what water usage? It was 0.
And one of these days, the public is going to get fed up, and they're going to say, the hell with this. We've got to reinvent the wheel here, because it's not working.
Yeah, well,
It really isn't.
I don't think we need to be the highest SDC, one of the highest SDC fee cities, because we're up there with Portland. I don't think we need to be up there with Portland.
Yeah. Well, the City of Portland Water Bureau still charges you after you've had your funeral.
I understand
Your
that.
obits.
Yeah, so anyway, so I can tell you from personal experience that
Okay, so
that 101. So what, gentlemen,
we're gonna
continue?
continue so we can finish looking through this. You're gonna get together with Pete on the letter, and so you'll bring that back to the next meeting. And
We'll be ready.
I'd like to see us wrap this thing up.
Well, I'm sick of looking at it.
By next meeting, I'll be through it and I'll be ready to rock and roll, so.
Bless you.
I only made it through halfway, otherwise I would have been ready
All
to do
right.
something tonight.
Everybody that gets through it by the end of the week gets a Cupid doll.
I cleared that with the bishop, too.
I'm gonna put down a recommendation for you to have a raise in pay for getting through 440
You give me
pages.
a lot of credit that I don't deserve.
I'm telling you, you get your pay raise.
20% raise on what his current salary.
Right.
Well, no, I'm looking at a 50% increase. I'm going all the way there. I'm not gonna hold back. I'm gonna request the increase. So we need a motion.
So I move we continue this, LEG.
18-4001.
18-1, yeah. Do we have time next meeting for it?
October 22nd?
Oh, great, just in time for Halloween.
I'll second.
Was there a second?
Second.
Yep.
Seconded by Zach. On the question, Mr. Walter, and you can just go down the line.
Kelly
We're all
will
good.
Commissioner Guile,
If Halloween doesn't interfere, y'all be here.
Commissioner Johnson,
And the question was, can we be here?
No, to continue this till the next meeting.
Yes, and can you be here? Unless Halloween interferes.
That's pretty important right now.
It soon becomes an issue of being here if we don't start accomplishing.
I want to know on this anyway.
Vern, we are accomplishing
Can we just
something.
vote?
I hate to
Let's
say
just
that,
vote.
so let's
Let's
go.
vote. Let's vote.
Vern, please.
Sure.
Aye.
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 All right. So we are continuing this to October 22nd, you said?
22nd.
22nd? Is it the 22nd?
I didn't check.
Yep. Has to be.
I've lost track of time. Okay, do we have any communications? Oh, also, I guess my communication request is, when we get done with this, where are we on the wetland issue
All right.
for Kanema?
Yep, that's one of the items I've been tasked with.
Yay!
So it's
Look.
not just that wetland, but 2 others.
Okay, so might as well throw 3 wetlands in together.
Right.
The other 2 are,
Myers Road, and, which is part of the Myers Road extension.
extension, okay.
And the other one,
It's 22nd?
yeah, is,
Why does that seem so?
I can't remember at this point, but there's a third one.
A third one, okay. All right, perfect.
Sorry. I will put that in the next packet.
Cool, all right.
I'd like to move we adjourn.
We had, see if staff has anything else they
Oh,
need
I'm
to tell us,
sorry,
because we
I thought
got,
you
I don't have any additional at this time.
I read his mind.
Kelly?
Kelly,
Then I will second Zach's motion.
any revelations? Okay, all right. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for coming.